What's up YouTube, it's your boy Rhett back at it again with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index and how you can use the information that it provides us to modify your Bitcoin dollar cost averaging strategy. So first we're going to be going over what is the Fear and Greed Index and how is it calculated. And then I'm also going to be doing a walkthrough tutorial of how you can implement the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index into your Gemini dollar cost averaging strategy up on AWS. The Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, just like everything else on this channel, is not financial advice. I just thought that it could be a really interesting way for me to personally alter my boring old dollar cost averaging strategy and see if in the long term it outperformed just buying the same static amount every day. And I thought that that was worth sharing with you guys. So go down below and smash the like button for Bitcoin dollar cost averaging strategies and let's level up your brain. The Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index is one number that represents the weighted average of Bitcoin volatility, Bitcoin market momentum and volume, social media sentiment, Bitcoin market dominance, and Google trend data about Bitcoin. All of that information is aggregated into this one number to tell us how greedy or fearful the general sentiment towards Bitcoin is. The index runs from 0 or extreme fear to 100, which is extreme greed. So a 0 would be, generally market sentiment, people are afraid of the price of Bitcoin, they think it's going to go down. And then generally at 100, people would be very bullish on the price of Bitcoin. Everyone thinks that it's going to continue to go up. And the language here is sort of based on this famous quote from Warren Buffett, to be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. Note that this fear and greed index is specific to Bitcoin and not crypto as a whole. So this is not looking at Ethereum data. This is not looking at Cardano data. This is not looking at Solana data. All of this is just Bitcoin. And so if we compare the fear and greed index to Bitcoin prices over time, we'll see that the Fear and Greed Index has done a good but not perfect job of predicting local maximums and minimums of Bitcoin price. You'll see on screen here, I'll show you some of this data just so that it's easy for you to consume. Back on June 27th of 2019, the Fear and Greed Index was at 92. So very greedy. People were very bullish on the sentiment of Bitcoin. And the price around that time was about $13,000 per Bitcoin, which is actually a local maximum of the price of Bitcoin that would not be reached again until November 2020, more than a year later. So in that case, we could say that the Fear and Greed Index did a good job of predicting that that was a local maximum of Bitcoin price. On August 22nd of 2019, we could see that the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index reached its lowest ever number of 5, but the price was still around about $10,000. And if you compare this to March 16th of 2020, the Fear and Greed Index was showing 9 or slightly higher than the 5 that it was showing previously, but Bitcoin price was actually only around 6,000. So the price was much lower, but the Fear and Greed Index was actually higher. And so this is a place that we could say Fear and Greed Index is not actually exactly correlated to price. And I'm just showing you these sort of examples so that you can get in your head that this is not a one-to-one thing. The Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index cannot perfectly predict the price of Bitcoin, and no other model can either. If someone is claiming that they have a model that can perfectly predict the price of Bitcoin and that it's going to follow it 100% of the time, that person is either stupid or is lying to you, and you should run away from them. As the saying goes, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. I personally find the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index interesting because I want to see if adding this layer of data to my dollar cost averaging strategy can actually outperform just a dumb strategy of buying the same amount every single day. I'm wondering if the Fear and Greed Index will be able to tell me, okay, today market sentiment is really low. Maybe price is lower than people would generally expect it to be. Maybe on this day you can buy slightly more than you would have bought otherwise. Or it can say, hey, market sentiment is really high. Everyone is extremely greedy. Maybe don't buy right now or buy a little bit less right now than you would have otherwise. And of course, you don't want to have to manually look at this data every day and then make a decision about trading. It would be great if this was just automated for you and you could run this bot against your normal dollar cost averaging bot and see which one outperformed the other. So next, let's jump into the code and learn how to integrate the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index into our normal Gemini API buy functions. Okay, so in the interest of saving everyone's time here, I'm not going to go through the full implementation of the Gemini API. If you guys do want to set that up for yourself for the first time and sort of understand the steps that we're taking in this video, I'll link that original tutorial up in the card, so definitely check that video out. Not only is it the best way to buy Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency that is offered on Gemini, because of those really low fees that Gemini offers with the API, the 0.1% buy fee, and then also those 10 free transfers per coin per month. So not only is it great because it's the cheapest way to buy cryptocurrency, it's also great because it acts as a platform for us to implement our own trading strategies for free, like this fear and greed index strategy that you can't really implement anywhere else. You actually have to be coding if you want to implement features like this. No other platform, unless it's some service that you're paying for, is going to allow you to do this for yourself for free. And again, the fear and greed index is specific to Bitcoin. So you could use this strategy to trade ETH with the fear and greed index data, but it's not really going to make sense because the fear and greed index is pointing to the Bitcoin market and ETH maybe doesn't line up to the fear and greed index as well as something like Bitcoin would. That's sort of the whole point of the fear and greed index, is to index Bitcoin, not to index Ethereum, right? But if you do find other trading indicators that you want me to implement in a similar way, definitely leave those down in the comments. I am going to be putting out more content like this related to the Gemini API throughout the year. And so if you haven't, again, implemented it already, it's going to be a good time at some point throughout this year to do that, because we are going to have more and more and more strategies coming out just based on what people want and what's easy to implement. So let's just jump into it here. We're just going to go to Lambda functions here in AWS, just like we would when we're making any other script. We're going to hit create function. We're going to author from scratch and we're going to give it Python 3.8. We're going to call this function maybe fear and greed index Gemini demo, and we'll give it x8664 and we'll just hit create function. So the first thing we're going to do when we create any function is we're going to scroll down to the bottom and hit add a layer down here. We're going to give custom layers and we're going to give it the Gemini layer that we have downloaded previously, and we'll just add this. I always like to add this first because if I don't add it, I'm going to forget and then it'll give me an error and things won't work and I'll have to go add it later. So now that we've added the layer, we're just going to delete the code that was in here by default, and we're going to go over to the Notion link that's down in the description, and you're going to look for buy Bitcoin fear and greed index here. So copy all of this code, come back over to AWS, and you'll paste the code here. And then obviously the next thing you need to do is fill in your Gemini public key and your Gemini private key for the API. If you've set up other Gemini scripts before, you can use the exact same API keys. I have created new ones just for the sake of this demo. You again shouldn't share your API keys with anyone or they'll be able to trade on your behalf. So that's why I generate new ones for each demo and then delete them right after the video. So once you have your public key and your private key in there, you're ready to start trading with the fear and greed index. The first indicator that we're going to look at here is, should you include the fear and greed index? If you want to include the fear and greed index data, you're going to set this to true. If you wanted to just do a normal buy, you would set this to false. So let's leave it to true right now so that we can see the functionality of the fear and greed index. And then the other important pieces of data here are the fear floor and the fear multiplier, and the greed ceiling and the greed multiplier. If we look at the fear and greed index here, we'll see that the fear and greed index is currently at extreme fear at around 23. And so what you can do over here is you can say, if the fear and greed index is maybe below 25, maybe I want to buy 1.5 times as much Bitcoin as I was going to buy previously. And then conversely, maybe if the greed ceiling was above 80, maybe you want to buy half the amount of Bitcoin, or maybe you want to buy no Bitcoin. Let's leave it at half for now, but you could change this to any number you want. Maybe it's 0.25, maybe it's you want to buy 1, maybe you want to buy the same amount. Maybe up here on the fear multiplier, maybe you want to buy twice as much if the fear is below 25. Or maybe you only want to buy twice as much if the fear is below 5. You can really set this up however you personally want to set it up. And that's what's really great about the Gemini API, again, is that my strategy and my risk tolerance doesn't have to be your strategy and your risk tolerance. You can set it up however you want to set it up. So for now, for demo purposes, let's leave it at 25 and we'll create a 1.5 times multiplier. And so if we go to the bottom here, we'll see that we're trying to buy $20 of Bitcoin. You could change this again to whatever you want it to be. We'll say deploy here because we have to deploy our changes after we edit the code at all, just so that AWS knows which version of the code to run. And then we're going to come up here and hit test. And when you hit test for the first time, you're going to need to give it an event name. So we'll call it test and we'll hit create. If we go over to Gemini Active Trader now, we can see that I currently have 3 open orders. And after I test the script, I should have a 4th open order for $30, which is 1.5 times the amount of the order that I wanted to place, because we are currently below the fear and greed threshold that I set within the script, right? So the fear and greed floor that I set was 25. The current fear and greed index is 23. And so now we should be, creating a 1.5 times 20, which is 30 buy order for Bitcoin. So let's hit test. And then we'll go over to Gemini and we'll wait for it to show up here. And that is currently just slightly lower than the spot price of Bitcoin. So if we waited a little bit, that order would fill. And again, for $30. Now let's see what happens if we come back here and we change the fear floor to, instead of being 25, now let's say only only if it's below 20 do we want to do the multiplier. And so now if we hit deploy, we would see that the fear and greed index is at 23. Our fear and greed floor is saying only buy more if it's below 20. And so now if we hit test, we should be creating an order in Gemini here for $20. And there it is. So $20 order for about the spot price of Bitcoin there. So let's cancel this also. Same thing here for greed, right? If we were in a very greedy market, if it was all the way over here towards greedy, extremely greedy, we would say, okay, greed is at 90. Our greed ceiling is 80. Anything above 80, we want to maybe buy half as much as we would have bought before, just to modify our dollar cost averaging strategy a little bit here. And so as an example of what that would look like, let's say that the fear and greed index value was 90. If we just hit deploy here and then test, we should see that it would create a buy order for $10. And that's exactly what happened. And so then obviously, just like every other script we've made, you could come back here to AWS, go over to EventBridge, go over to rules, create a rule, and then automate this script once every however many days you wanted to run it. So let's say you wanted to automate fear and greed weekly. You could come down here to schedule. You could say days 7, and then scroll down here to Lambda function, and you would give it the fear and greed index Gemini demo function that we just wrote in that last segment there. And then you could scroll down and just hit create. And then remember that once you create a script on that once every 7 days schedule, today, and when you hit create will actually be the first day. And so if we just wait here for a little bit in Gemini, we should see another order come through from when we just initialized that scheduling through EventBridge. And it did take a little bit there, but it did show up again at that $10 price that we wanted, just because we didn't redeploy the script, right? So it's pulling the latest thing that we had there. So I'm gonna hit cancel. But hopefully that gives you a really good idea of how you can modify your current dollar cost averaging strategy to include the fear and greed indicator. If you guys do have any comments, feel free to leave those down below. And then just like any other script that you don't want to, have working anymore, you can come up here to disable. And if you did want to turn it back on again, disable is going to be what you want to do. And then obviously if you want to get rid of it forever, you can just hit delete. I'm going to delete for now because I already have another one up here running doing the same thing. So once it's deleted, it's not going to run automatically anymore, and you're not going to need to worry about it. Go down below and smash the like button if you guys liked this video and found it helpful and want to see other things like the 200-day moving average integrated into the Gemini API scripts. If you guys get stuck, go down below and leave a comment. I do still respond to all the comments. That's it for today, guys. Hope you found the video helpful. I love you all. Goodbye.